What is an SOC, a Stipulated Order of Continuance? Are you interested in ways criminal cases are resolved in Washington State? Are you charged with a crime and you've heard talk of an SOC? What is it? What are the good parts? What are the bad parts? How does it work? Well, if any of that applies to you, this is the video for you. My name is Lance Fryrear, and I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. We've been defending people charged with crimes for more than 20 years, and oftentimes we are faced with the decision of should our client accept an SOC. So let's start with what I'm going to cover in the video. Number one, what is an SOC? What does it even mean, Lance? And what are some other things that are like an SOC but have different names? Number two, what are the pitfalls to watch out for? How does it work? What can happen on the good side? What can happen on the bad side? And what are things to avoid? And finally, number three, what are some other things you might want to ask for from your attorney or the prosecutor if we think an SOC might not work for you? So I'm putting out these videos to help educate the public. There's not a lot of information out there, so if you find this video useful, please like and please subscribe. More people will get the information they need, and now I'm just going to jump right into it. So what is an SOC? An SOC stands for Stipulated Order of Continuance. It can also be a diversion, sometimes it's called, in adult court. In every municipal court, there's something called a prosecutorial offer of diversion, which is similar to an SOC. There's also dispositional continuances, they called in Seattle Municipal, but mainly it's called an SOC, Stipulated Order of Continuance. So a criminal case means that you're charged with a crime, and the typical resolutions are conviction by trial or guilty plea of the charge. Let's imagine it's an assault charge. It can be reduced to a lesser charge. In an assault case, it might be disorderly conduct, and DUI might be reduced to negligent driving. Or it can get dismissed, either on the motion of the prosecutor or a legal motion by your attorney or a jury finding someone not guilty. So an SOC is somewhere in between, which is usually very beneficial for the defendant. So if you're a defendant watching this, think about an SOC as a good thing, typically. It's a contract between you and the prosecuting agency. In the case of a city, like City of Bellevue, an SOC is a contract that typically leads to a dismissal if you, the defendant, fulfill the terms of the contract. As far as what are the terms of the contract, well, the good side is typically it ends in a dismissal unless it's negotiated for a reduction, like a DUI SOC might get reduced to negligent driving instead of a dismissal. So the good side is if you live up to the terms of the contract, it gets dismissed. The bad side is that word stipulation. By the word stipulation means that if you don't live up to the terms of the contract, then you've stipulated to the admissibility of the police report only if the contract is violated, and the court's going to read the report and probably find you guilty. So don't get me wrong, you are not pleading guilty in an SOC, you are not. But if you violate the terms, you're giving up your rights to a trial, and the judge will read the report and probably find you guilty at sort of a judge bench trial where they just read the reports and you don't get to present a defense. So that's what's in it for the prosecutor. The prosecutor gets a chance to let you go if you do the right things. And if you don't do the right things, they get a conviction without having to prove anything, right? At least bring in witnesses, that they still have to have the proof in the report. So that's what an SOC is. So number two, I said I was going to cover sort of what's the good and the bad, what are the tips to look out for. So for us, for our clients, the most important thing is you don't want your attorney, be it either the public defender or a private attorney, to be lazy, okay? An SOC, when you enter that contract, you've given up your rights. So you really want to make sure that you are able to comply with the terms of the SOC. Let's say the SOC requires you to do domestic violence moral recognition therapy, DVMRT. That's 6 months of classes. Well, I've seen law firms, even private law firms, just enter someone into that SOC and before they've even started the DVMRT. And there's going to be a time limit. And let me tell you, for affirmative things we need to do, classes, treatment, life gets in the way, right? There's things where you may not be able to get into a waiting list. You may, suffer a loss of a job, or there could be health problems, or you might just forget about it. And once you've entered that SOC, you need to have already started the programs or even completed them if they're a short program. That's the best thing, because you need to be protected from the system not getting you in what you need to do, or even yourself, because you just don't get it done. So the first thing is, you don't want to have a lazy situation where the attorneys are making it easier themselves and giving up your rights, telling you give up your rights for the benefit of the SOC before we know that you can complete it. The second tip is, if you're a non-citizen. If you're a non-citizen, your attorney should, in most cases, needs to change some of the language in the SOC and take out that word stipulation. The federal government is not like that when it comes to immigration. And usually skilled attorneys will consult the Washington Immigration Rights Project for some advice about whether or not that language needs to be changed. And usually it does. And that can be hard because prosecutors often don't want the stuff changed, right? So your attorney needs to fight pretty hard on that, unless the immigration type attorneys have said it's not necessary. And another tip is cost. Oftentimes there's some amount of monitoring costs. There's no fine, but you have to make sure you're able to pay the costs, and don't forget to pay the costs. In places like Linwood, the costs are only $150, okay? In places like Bellevue, it's closer to $350, and sometimes there's more probation costs. But make sure those get paid right away, because you don't want to lose the benefit of your dismissal by forgetting to do that. And I'll just jump into one other thing. How long does an SOC last? How long do you have to stay out of trouble? Typically between 12 and 24 months. An average of many jurisdictions is 18 months. The stronger the case is for you, maybe it might get down to 6 months, and the worse it is for you, maybe it can get up to 60 months. But think between 12 and 24 months, usually no crimes, and maybe some affirmative conditions like alcohol classes or anger management or DVMRT. So thanks for staying to the end. Number 3, if an SOC doesn't seem right to you, or there's immigration concerns, what might your attorney be able to do? Your public defender, your private attorney may be able to negotiate for what we call an unofficial SOC, an agreement for a continuance, but no paperwork and no stipulations. Hey, prosecutor, I'll agree that my client does these things and stays out of trouble for this period of time. And if they do, you dismiss it. And, while that's a gentleman or gentlewoman's agreement, it's not in writing, it will be honored by prosecutors. I've never seen it not. And why might this be a benefit? Well, you may not want to give up your trial rights, or you may not be able to enter into a stipulation due to your immigration situation. And in the right case, prosecutors, if they have a good relationship with your attorney and the attorney hasn't asked for it too often, and your case is special, sometimes we can get that. Other times, what we could do is just say, look, you just need to dismiss it. The proof's not there. He or she's already done all these things. We're going to confirm it for trial. So why don't just dismiss it? And sometimes, that's what they'll do if they're faced with no other choice. But you need to listen to your attorney. Your attorney is going to know what's likely or not, because each prosecutor is different. And hopefully, if your attorney is experienced, they've had experience with your prosecutor in the past. If not, they know who to ask to find out what's likely. Finally, let's say an SOC doesn't make sense because you don't want to run the risk of violating the SOC and being convicted of the original charge. Well, sometimes the charge will get changed to something that's not so hard. An assault might be able to be changed to disorderly conduct immediately with like a deferred sentence, so it gets dismissed, but it can never become an assault again if you get accused of something. So there's also ways charges can be changed. And if we talked about, there's also something called deferred prosecution, but that's a whole nother deal where you do alcohol or drug treatment to make something go away. So I hope this has answered some questions about the pluses and minuses of an SOC, what it is and how it works. If you violate it, the prosecutor will bring a hearing in front of a judge to make a determination whether or not there is a violation and the SOC contract should be revoked, which means you get convicted. And if you live up to the terms of the SOC, make sure to reach out to your attorney because sometimes the court doesn't dismiss the case. Sometimes it forgets. Sometimes there needs to be a hearing. Sometimes there needs to be affirmative action by your attorney, especially during these COVID times. I'm filming this August 2021. My firm had to really do a lot of extra effort in a couple of cases in Seattle to get an SOC successfully completed, dismissed by the court because of all the backlog and everything like that. Just don't assume it's going to happen, that you'll get your dismissal if you've already entered an SOC. So again, if you found this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people will get this information. And if you're charged with a crime or you have questions about a crime or you need legal representation on a crime, feel free to give my office a call. Again, we've been defending people charged with crimes for more than 20 years. We'll listen to what situation you're in. If it makes sense, we'll set you an appointment. We'll do everything we can, and we'll be there for you. Thank you.